You're listening to The Rich Life Revolution with me, Michelle Cooper. My mission is to empower you to step into your next level of wealthy. You'll hear all the deets, a little bit of inspiration, and real life takeaways so that you can create your own rich life revolution. Let's dig in. Hey there, welcome to episode 12. Evolve to align your head, your heart, and your higher purpose with my guest, Yanik Silver. This is a really juicy episode, and I adore Yanik. I am so grateful that he was able to fit us into his very busy schedule because he drops pure gold in this episode. You see, I always felt this nudge to do business differently, but I really didn't understand what that meant. When I read Yanik's book, Evolved Enterprise, it all clicked into place. And then I got to spend time with him, and it solidified everything for me. So now I want to share that with you all. In today's episode, we cover Yanik's step-by-step process to becoming an evolved enterprise and incorporate his 3 C's: community, creation, and culture. Over the years, I've learned so much from Yanik. He is a legend in the marketing world, but even more so, he created the awesome organization Maverick1000, a phenomenal group of people doing big things in our world. I love being part of that organization, and it constantly pushes me outside my comfort zone. This is a jam-packed episode, and I really can't wait to hear your biggest aha moments. Enjoy. I am so excited to bring to you somebody who is a game changer in my life and really was placed in my life on part of a divine intervention, Mr. Yanik Silver. Welcome, Yanik.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. Are you talking about divine intervention because of our Baja trip when you had the pants off you?
Well, I think originally you came into my life as a person that my friend Erin said I needed to meet. But then I've had the blessing of having several adventures with you. But I really think that Baja trip, I talk about that to so many people because it was such a game changer for me. Like, it forced me to really face all my fears and really be the most vulnerable I've ever been, I think, in my life. Well, at least in my kind of like recent life. So for those of you who don't know my Baja trip experience, Yanik has an amazing organization, and I am part of it. And he organizes these epic adventures. And one of them in 2022 was to the Baja, and we had the Baja 1000 kind of vehicles, and we raced across the desert as a team of 8 cars, 2 teams of 4. I got to drive with Yanik. He drove. I was his navigator. I drove. He was my navigator. And then there were moments where he actually said to me, you know what? You got to step up, Michelle. Get back in that driver's seat. And you got this. So I'm so grateful. Like, these adventures you organized, Yanik, they are amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we had so much fun, and it was actually amazing seeing you just step it up fully in that, because it was, I'm pretty sure it was all men. I can't remember, right? It
was all men.
Yeah, all men and you, and then so that's another intimidating. Like, that's not our normal de facto. Like, our trips are a really nice mix typically, but that one ended up being all men, and then it could have been really easy if you'd be like, I drove a little bit, I'm good, and then let me just be in the passenger side. And it definitely is sometimes almost like a metaphor in some ways for life, right? It's like, all right, well, let me just step in the passenger side, and instead of deciding to totally drive. But we can get to that, and then of course also the great little story about so that we have microphones in between every car, and the cars are usually pretty far apart, not driving each other's dust. And of course, I love giving people a little bit of a hard time and kind of nudging them and instigating. And my wife will tell you that that is my number one trait that she loves so much is just bothering her. And so you're on the microphone and you have to like tell people if you're arriving or whatever's happening, so you have to communicate. And I'm pretty sure, I think I took it a little too far, but I'm like, car three, coming in hot, coming in hot. And you guys are car two. And you thought that we were about to rear end you. So maybe not as funny in the way that it played out, but in my head it worked out better. But
Well, it was pretty funny once you realized it was a joke, but like in the moment it felt like, oh shit, like Yanik and Mike are going to land on top of us. Like
we did almost have that happen on another trip with two other Maverick members that decided to not follow instructions and came over these big, huge hill. And I think I told you about it. I was with another member and I'm like, I feel like we need to move over to the side. She's like, no, they heard that. Don't worry. And I move over to the side and literally the car comes flying over and would have landed on us. I'm like,
oh my God.
Intuition, like, listen to your intuition, and which is an interesting topic maybe for business as well.
It absolutely is an interesting topic because it's real life, right? And it's not like just an amusement ride. Like these are real vehicles. It's the real world and shit happens. And you and Scott were both like, you know what? You got to get back in the driver's seat and you can do this. Like we got you. And it was one of the times that I felt actually the most supported and like in a really serious way, because I was pretty scared at times. And also like, both you and Scott were like, you got to lean into the flow, right? Like you got to relax. You're really tense. Like you're holding the steering wheel, like really tight kind of thing, right? And just relax and just breathe. And that to me does help you drop down into that intuitive state, right? Which is, I think when we think about business, a lot of people ignore that piece. They're so busy doing and like the hustle and the, taking the action and all this stuff that they kind of push aside those intuitive nudges that come up.
Well, I mean, it's interesting for you, right? I'm looking at your background and you got the crystals and good vibes and, all these different things, but, you are in some capacity in the financial space, working with their books and so forth. So that can feel very left brain, I guess, and very, very just in your head and doing. So it's kind of, I'd be curious on, your part, because it seems like you've been expanding this idea of, we were just talking about this before our call about like your head, your heart, your higher purpose. And part of that for sure is the intuition and really leaning into exactly who you are. And I imagine that if a client sees you and they're like, oh, I don't want an accountant that is into crystals or whatever, then that's not the right client for you.
Yeah, for sure. And that does come up, right? I remember hearing from somebody who did like copywriting and stuff like that. And they were saying like your messaging needs to repel people as much as it needs to attract. Right. And so I tried to get very clear on our messaging for Alchemy because we're not like PricewaterhouseCoopers. We don't do business like that. We are a business for good, which you helped me really step into in such an embodied way, which is that connection between head and heart and our intuition and everything and moving that impact out into the world. So I do want to touch on that for sure or expand on that. And then the other part is the whole thing around money, which I know like you embody, is letting go of that control and letting go of like, we still got to keep track of things, but we don't need to do it from a fight or flight state. We don't need to do it from like we have to control this and we have to like, there's, all this tension around it, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's interesting. So my, I guess I'll just share maybe the background. And so when we talk about head, heart, higher purpose, like for me, my background was direct response, copywriting, marketing. So that's my business side. And then, I think it's really important to make sure that that's still involved in everything. And so for the entrepreneurs that are listening to this, right, like if you're saying, oh, we're going to make a business for good, or, my term is Evolved Enterprise. It's like, you don't need to throw away your business sense. Like we're not asking you to make this a charity or a nonprofit or whatever it is, and not take be like, all right, well, I need to sacrifice now because I care about whatever, the ocean, or I care about the environment, or I care about this thing. But there is this really interesting way of, to me, I believe, integrating it all together. And that's been part of my journey. So I started off, actually, my dad came over, my mom and my grandmother and me from Russia when I was 3 years old. And so you'll hear a lot about these like immigrant success stories. And I lived it where, my dad came over at $256 or $58 or whatever it is. I get the number wrong, but in that general ballpark. And he ended up starting a medical equipment sales and service company, maybe a year or so after he got here. And so I grew up working in that business. And so I got a very early education in business. 14 years old, I was telemarketing, and that was fun, very sarcastically said. And then 16, I was out on the road cold calling. I got a car, but the only way I got a car was if I went out and cold called. And my dad's like, "Yeah, Mr. Yanik, go make some sales."
Oh my God.
I had no idea what I'm doing. And I'm talking to these, 50-year-old doctors, and I'm this 16, 17-year-old kid. And it sucked. I mean, it definitely sucked for the most part, but I stuck with it. And then one of my doctors, who I sold an entire surgery center to, he's like, "You're kind of into this like marketing and advertising stuff." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, here's this tape. I just got back from a $10,000 seminar. Do you think your dad would send you?" I'm like, "No, my dad would never send me to that thing." But here's the tape. And there's this guy named Jay Abraham. And it was the first time that I really started learning about marketing the right way. So I'd been doing all of my dad's ads because I spoke and wrote much better English than he did. And so, but the ads were like, it'd have a big whale on top of it and be like, "This is a whale of a deal," or something like that. It was pretty terrible. And then I started learning about, there's actual concepts in marketing and advertising to get people to pay attention and then to take action. But then what I was fascinated by was that you could actually write something and have, in my case, a doctor or really anyone, raise their hand and say, "Yeah, I'm interested," or even give you money. And I thought that was the most amazing thing. Like, you could actually have someone give you money by just reading an ad or something like that. And so I started learning as much as I possibly could about this stuff. And I was just fascinated by it. And we would have these big ads that I would write. My dad would look at it. He's like, "Who's going to read all this?" I'm like, "Oh, let's just try it. Let's see what happens." And people were, sending us back money. And so it grew my dad's business from a little regional player to a national player. And so that was kind of my first taste of like, all right, that I created something that could work. And it was just fascinating to see. And I had this really nice little petri dish or like incubator that I could play around with and see what happened.
Wow. I didn't know that part of your story. I think that's so interesting. Like, I knew that you were a pretty big name in kind of like the direct marketing kind of world, right?
Yeah, and internet marketing space. But so that came next, right? So that was like the skills that I had that then grew into seeing the internet start blossoming. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. Let me see if, I could do anything here." And then did pretty well there. And then people were like, "Hey, how did you do that? Could you teach me what you learned?" And so a lot of people were like, "Oh, this guy's an overnight success story." But it was really at least 10, 12, who knows how many years before of learning all the stuff about copy and about marketing and so forth. And yeah, that was the marketing side of the journey.
And then what happened?
So then about 15 years ago, I had a really simple question that started popping up. I was like, "Am I happy? And would I be happy if I was doing what I'm doing for 10 more years?" And when I was really honest with myself and in my journal, I'm like, "No." And it was really hard too, because I'd go to, Michelle, like I'd go to conferences, even if I wasn't speaking, I'd go to a conference in the digital world and they'd be like, "Dude, you changed my life. I sell guitar lessons online now," or whatever. And it made me financially independent. I'm like, "That's amazing." But it just didn't feel like the ultimate fulfillment of who I was. And so I think that little nagging, I call it now a cosmic alarm clock. And it's like these moments that we get. And so I also think of it as like different phases of business, right? Like phase one is you jump out of the airplane, you're trying to build the parachute on the way down before you land. And then phase two, you're like, okay, it starts working. You're like, "Oh, wow, this is working." And you're getting like some accolades or PR, more customers, more profits are coming in. And then things are kind of going up and up. And then you get to this sort of plateau. And that's phase three, where it's like, now what? And usually it's either, it could be a selling of the business. It could be you're just falling out of love with it. And like that little cosmic alarm clock of like, sometimes it's like this little nagging, maybe depression or just this, you're like, there's something more. And so you could either go back, which is like almost like golden handcuffs, and you feel like your soul's dying a little bit each day because you're not truly doing what you're meant to be doing. But you're like, "Oh, well, this is a safe path," or this is this is what I know. Or you can make this gigantic leap and into this next phase, and that's connecting your head, your heart, and your higher purpose. And I can tell you, be interested in, in your side of it too, but I can tell you, like, from my side, it was one of the scariest things, because originally I was just like, all right, well, I had this idea for Maverick, and in my journal, I'm like, all right, where am I most happy? I'm like, I'm happiest when I hang out with other entrepreneurs and my colleagues and friends, and we go off on adventure trips, and we combine it with business, and we combine it with some sort of charity element, and we combine it with some fun. And so actually the very first one was a Baja trip in 2008, I think. And on that trip, we lost maybe $40,000, and I'm like, whatever. It's an investment. It's a whole different kind of business. And then about $400,000 in, my wife's like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And I didn't have a very good answer for her, aside from, I feel like there's something here. And that was that point of, I could easily go back to the sort of the golden handcuffs, which is the digital marketing space, and be like, all right. But it didn't feel like I was growing anymore there, and it didn't feel like it was in full alignment. And so I just started like cutting things off from there. And, I'd be like, oh, this is a couple $100,000 revenue stream. Wow, this is not exactly what I want to do. And just kept cutting, sort of like burning the bridges. And then it really got me to the spot of like asking why. And so the Evolved Enterprise really came from me, like that first time when things were going sideways. I had built 7 or 8 different products ideas that all hit the 7-figure mark, really without much of a business plan, or just kind of like very intuitive, like, all right, here's what I'm interested in. Let me just keep following this. And then this was the first one that I felt even more deeply connected to, and it wasn't working. And so it was this weird feeling. And it really forced me to go back. I'd been studying personal development since I was that 17-year-old kid driving around in my car with random tapes. And so like, it really forced me to go back to like the bedrock. And it was interesting. During this time, I sold my Aston Martin. So I had this Aston Martin that was kind of my symbol of success. And I could have easily leased a Mercedes or whatever if I wanted. But I'm like, let me sit with this and actually, like what's happening here, and just lean into it. And so it really forced me to get into the why. And the why wasn't to build an adventure travel company. It was to change the way business is played. And so did a lot of reflection and just, I don't know, soul kind of searching, I guess. And so that's when we changed the name to Maverick1000 to represent this idea that one Maverick could change an industry, but 1,000 together could help change the world. And that whole idea and the bigger mission. And so all those pieces started coming together from different people we had met from adventures and experiences, some that were well known, like you mentioned, Necker Island. Richard Branson's been a huge influence, but some very unknown kind of business icons, or those that helped really create the pieces, which later became the Evolved Enterprise framework, and helped me get out of what was a very sideways kind of way of being, and move it solidly into the black.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I think that it's so great to hear like your journey, right? And to know that it's not, for so many of us, it's not linear, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I did this and then I stopped doing this, I started doing this, and it was equally successful. And, it was just like this up curve thing all the time.
Especially when you're doing this like very deep alignment work of like your head, your heart, and your higher purpose. And so maybe I should define that. So the head is like your business side, your heart is the impact that you want to make in the world, and then your higher purpose is like, why am I here? Like, why are you truly here, and what are you designed to do? And then every once in a while, I also add in like your happy inner child. So if you can connect all those together, I like alliteration for my copywriting days, and then you got something there.
Yeah, it's so good. And for me, I think there's this scary point, right, where you realize, oh, maybe this thing I've built to this certain level isn't the be all end all, right? And I'm actually kind of just playing life or living life in defense, not kind of like offense. And I'm just trying to maintain the status quo. And I know for me, with deciding to join Mavericks and, go on these adventures, I don't always know why. Like I think I shared with you with the Baja one, I actually didn't know what I was signing up for, truly. Like, I don't know if I just didn't read it, or I thought it was something, like, I thought we were going to be going through the Baja, not in the way we did at all. But I truly feel like that trip was such a gift. It was just so outside my comfort zone. And even in our final, celebratory dinner and stuff, at that amazing venue we went to, I had a conversation with one of the other participants that was a $1 million business idea just dropped into my lap. And I was like, oh, look at that. Right. And, he was like, you're perfect for this. You can do that. And it was an expansion of even an idea that I maybe kind of had, but he just saw it in such a different way that had such a bigger impact than I could ever have seen. And I always tell people when I talk about Maverick, because they'll see pictures of me at Necker Island or, in the Baja or whatever, doing things with all these people. This group is a group of people who think bigger than I can possibly think in my present state. And so it's such a value to be in that space with them because they hold this space for me to expand beyond what I see possible for myself.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? Like, so I think that your life changes through the books you read or materials you study, the people that you meet, and the experiences that you have. And so that's always been my three sort of things. And so this idea of the bigger vision is, it's one thing to have people or colleagues or friends who think big, but then also they have to be able to, do something with it, right? Like it's kind of funny. I don't even know how to quite describe Mavericks because it's like on one hand you have these very big thinking individuals, and then on the other hand you have like funny junior high humor that happens in the next second. But at the same time, they actually do have the connections or the network or the resources to go get something done in the world that's pretty big and exciting, and also support those that are thinking like that too. And I think that's one of the big things. It's like there's not that many places you can find others who want to support you fully in that blossoming and unfolding and even bigger way, and not have that bit of jealousy or they want to see what everyone else can do in the world and support you and be a part of it. And, I'm not saying this as like a commercial for Maverick, but I think you can hone that within your own world yourself, right? Like there's been different success teachers that have said, all right, you're the representation of the 5 people that you're closest to. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. It might not be 5, but whatever it is, you can kind of tell like when there's certain people in your life that are expansive and are growth oriented and want to see you grow to your full potential and want to support that. And like when you tell them a big idea, they're not going to laugh at you because like those big ideas, especially when they're in their infancy, are very, very fragile.
They are.
And if you tell someone, oh, I'm going to do this with my company, or I want to do whatever it is, to have those people in your corner that aren't going to laugh at you or not going to, or, like you need that support. And you can bring that together yourself for sure. I think I saw this one study one time that looked at every successful person or whoever, how they defined it. And it was like across all different things like athletics, business, science, whatever. And the only common denominator that they found was that they had at least one person that just unequivocally, like completely supported them no matter what. It was like a cheerleader for them. And for me, that was definitely my mom. That she had no idea what I was doing in the digital marketing world, whatever. But she was always just like, you
can do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so having that, or even like assembling that around you is so powerful. It's huge because, like you said, that $1 million idea kind of dropped into your lap, but you also have to be receptive enough to have it, and then also those around you be like, yeah, this is something for you.
Yeah, for sure. And, I realized being part of the mastermind within Maverick and stuff, that there's this kind of like this, I call it like kind of my karmic journey that I didn't totally understand how it related to my business and my purpose and, like the things that I stand for. And it's really helped me get clear on what's important to me and how my business can contribute to a better world, right? And that's been such a gift. Like your book, Evolved Enterprise, I give it to everybody that I come across. And I have shared it with so many people because along with the cards and the journal, those are my favorite. Like anybody who does a set of cards and a journal that goes along with a book, I'm like all in on. But yours in particular, I think is just so great. And it really helped me understand that, my business, we would always kind of, give to causes and initiatives that we wanted to support. But it really helped me understand that my business has an impact. in the world, right? And an energetic impact. What I believe personally is that money is meant to circulate. So it's not meant to be hoarded by certain individuals, right? We help our clients circulate money because 1% of the revenue we receive from them goes out into the world to causes and organizations and initiatives that are important to the clients and our team members. So, you in your book, you hook us up with B1G1, which is an awesome organization that we are fully engaged with now. And Chris, who's in my mastermind, he's helped me get connected with 1% for the planet. And we're deeply supportive of some of the other initiatives that are part of some of the Maverick members, including 4Ocean and stuff like that. But to me, it's not really about like, oh, yeah, we're given this money. It's that we're having an impact and we're bringing along everybody, our team members, our suppliers, our client, everybody's along for the journey. They don't even sometimes even realize they're along for the journey, right? But they are contributing. And I know we recently welcomed Marie Elizabeth into Maverick as a member. She is a client of mine, and one of her really important causes is animal welfare. And when I shared with her that we have an organization in Vietnam that takes the money that we give them, all of it, 100% of that money, and buys dogs from the meat market and gets them shipped out of the country, she was blown away. And she was like, wow. And it's like boots on the ground doing the things to create the impact that we want to see in the world. And your book really helped me really solidify in that business. So I'm very grateful.
Oh, thank you. Well, that was amazing. Just like you just ran through the whole litany of some amazing stuff that happens when you do that. And maybe I'll pull on a couple of those threads because I think there's some really interesting stuff there. So the Evolved Enterprise framework, you can go kind of as deep as you want with it, but it starts with you, as you were talking about, like that journey. And so the more we explore and figure out like who we are, what do we care about, what really matters to us, it's going to really impact our entire business and the ripples that we can have. And the more you understand who you are, then you can show up as a better leader, better founder, CEO, or whatever position that you're in, and of course happier and more aligned. And then the next sort of layer out is the cause, the why. And so you really articulate it really well. You said, okay, 1% goes towards client causes and our team's causes. So you've defined it in that way. So the cause, the way I talk about it a lot is like, okay, is there maybe a wrong that you want to right in the world? So maybe it's for a very particular thing. So you mentioned 4Ocean. One of our members, Alex Schulz, he's a co-founder of it, and they I think like 28 million pounds of something of plastic that they've taken out of the waterways or something like that. And so he's a surfer and grew up on the beaches, and that was what he cared about. And they turned that into a unique business in that way. But maybe there's not one thing that you care about personally, or you're like, all right, well, what do my clients care about? And so, that's another way of turning it around and saying, okay, well, we can stand for that, or our team members, and then that gets everyone aligned as well. And it's really interesting to then start tracking the impact and see what happens. And then that also starts building the next ring out is community, culture, and creation. So the community are your quote unquote customers, but really it's like you start building a community. And then your creation is the product or service itself is like, how do we bake in that impact? And then the culture is what it's either via osmosis or more intentional. And part of that culture is that giving culture impact. And then you just listed off all the different, the clients, the team members, the community, like all of it, you start seeing these ripples of impact, and they get, taken along on the ride too. And some of them don't even know how far they're going down it, but they just get like informed a little bit. They're like, and like with Marie Elizabeth, the fact that she cares about animal welfare, and then you just said, well, this is what we do. That's such a unique kind of tie-in, and most people don't do anything like that. And because she cares about that, it's like just a double, triple, quadruple win. It just works all around. And so using that evolved enterprise model in that way, it really does help your business. Like so many people, like they might think of it from a pragmatic, like, oh, I don't know, like in your case, it's like, I'm just giving away money, and that becomes an expense. But your business, I'm sure, would you say 80%, 90% is built on referrals?
100% is built on referrals.
Okay. Right. And so I would imagine that, a client like Marie Elizabeth, who like gets that full body yes about your services and that impact element baked into it, I imagine that she'd be more inclined to refer you to a client.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's like when you can align these things together, it becomes, it's like you start using your head, right? It's the marketing side, but you're not doing it from a place of this is a tactic or this is this is something that I think is going to grow our business. And yes, it will, but it's also got to come from that deep resonance of your heart and the impact that you want to make in the world.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that before I read your book, I didn't sit comfortably with me. I don't think I understood it with the clarity that I do now. Like I hadn't kind of connected the dots because I would think, oh, we shouldn't talk about that because I don't want it to be a marketing thing, right? Like I don't want it to be a tactic. Like, look at us over here doing this thing, giving away this money. Like I felt uncomfortable with it, but I see it in a very different light now. And we are having such a significant impact, I think. And I keep people updated on that because, I think they care. Like even my team, like through B1G1, it was like 200 bookkeeping courses to women in a Uganda collective, like a women's entrepreneur collective. And literally, it did not cost us very much money to do that. But my team of bookkeepers were like, that's awesome. Like, we're helping them understand bookkeeping. And they even said to me, how else can we get involved in that? Can we go there and teach them? Right. And I'm like, well,
maybe,
I guess we could. Like, I don't know.
What an amazing team bonding trip that would be. And I could see you doing that, right? Like it's opening up the doors and then that becomes, this amazing impact story that they're going to share forever.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe a few clients even come with you. We'll do some we'll do some on the spot right now brainstorming about it. But, get a few clients to go there too. It becomes a unique adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I thought it was neat that it actually, like I could see that it added energy to them. It was helping to fill them up. And through the work I've done with you and with Chris in our Maverick Mastermind and like the conversations we've had, whether that's been driving through the Baja or it's been, sitting on Necker Island or just on a call, I'm clear in my role as a leader in my organization. And that's hugely impactful.
And where was that shift that you said before? It felt kind of like a tactic or it felt like you didn't want to share it?
Yeah, I think it was really understanding that my business can be a force of good in everyone's life, and for the clients, for the team members, and for the world at large, right? I just didn't see my business in that way. I was like, oh, well, a little bit of, I think, scarcity and lack in like, oh, well, we can't just give away money. We have to be responsible with our money kind of thing. But also in truly understanding that it's like it's like a wheel that it all goes together. And it was like this moment that clicked. And I was like, oh, I created this business. Something in me needed to have this expressed out into the world. Like people talk about know your why, which I get, and I'm familiar with that, right? But I could never connect like my lived experience with my business. I didn't see the direct connection. I don't know that there is a totally direct connection, but I'm clear that my ultimate goal is to purchase a marine vessel for the Paul Watson Society, right? The foundation. And he fights against anti-whaling. Like, I don't want to see marine life killed anymore, whether that's through drift nets and ghost nets or people who harpoon whales or dolphins or whatever, right? Like, I know that's related to my lived experience. I didn't see that in the past. I couldn't make that connection. Now I can.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So when I look at businesses, I see a couple different leverage points, right? And it's very exciting to be like, it doesn't have to default to money, right? Like it doesn't have to default to, we make this contribution and this is the dollar amount, because there's other ways as well of impacting. And so it could be through your hiring practices. I call this empowered employment. And there's a company I feature in the book that is, they do quality control testing for different user platforms and interfaces and so forth. And they hire people on the neurodiversity spectrum, essentially, because typically they have more attention to detail, are okay with repetitive tasks. So it's like taking something that would be looked at as a disadvantage and turning it into a competitive advantage for your company. So I think there's lots of, there's things like that. There's your actual distribution, like, how to use your voice. Patagonia is, to me, like one of the stellar companies in this space where, I remember, I think Black Friday, maybe last year or 2 years ago, they literally took their whole homepage and turned it into a campaign for one of the causes that they really cared about. And, some people are like, well, do you want to get politics involved? And you should really not get that. Like, it all depends how far you want to go. Like, you don't have to, like, you can take the small, you can take it, go all the way in. So there's distribution, there's empowered employment, there's your supply chain. Like, who are you buying from? Like, you can be thinking about, like, who are my partners and who am I buying from? And what kind of impact are they making in the world? You got your actual talent within the organization. So you have your team of bookkeepers. You said, how excited they got about supporting bookkeeping training in Uganda, but there's also an opportunity where you take that talent and you're like, all right, well, we're going to donate 5% of our time to, in your case, maybe it's ocean related causes or companies that have anything to do with the ocean. Who knows what it is, but it's like we can use the talent within the organization or the special skill that they have. There's a company called Pacific that is they don't only do soups, but they do non-perishable foods and mostly soups. And what they do is once a month, they shut down their production line and they work with a local food bank. And they're like, okay, give us all your food, whatever you got. And we're going to creatively come up with some sort of recipes and turn them into non-perishable products. And the team loves it because that's their unique talent. They don't get to have as much creativity because they're running the same factory for whatever, tomato soup or whatever their things are. But now they're like, oh, well, what can you do with this piece of food or this thing? And so it uses their unique talent in some way. And so that's one of them. And then the other is the actual product or service, right? Like, how do we integrate that impact or bake it in some way? And there's also 11 impact models I talk about in the book, because a lot of times people have seen like the buy one, give one, and they're like, okay, well, that's the way I'm doing it. And that's not the only way to do it. And that sometimes that's going to be a round peg in a square hole or whatever that saying is, because it's like, so I'm friends with Blake Mykoski, who built Tom's Shoes, and they've, can't remember the number recently, but some millions of pairs of shoes that they've given away because people have bought them. And that really drove their company tremendously. But, he would tell you, like, they never thought they'd be that big, and it created all these sort of like logistical issues. And then it took away marketplace from local shoe sellers and all this, these unintentional byproducts that happen. So that buy one, give one is not always the best way of doing it. It can be. It all depends. Like a Bombas sock company grew incredibly well because they saw that socks were one of the biggest items that were needed in homeless shelters. So they designed a better sock to be given away. It was like a darker color, had antimicrobial aspect, reinforced seams. So it was like a better sock. And they thought it was going to take 10 years to sell 1 million socks. They did it in a year or a year and a half or something like that. Maybe 2 years. So, but it was some accelerated amount of time. And one of the founders got their logo tattooed somewhere on his body because he said he would do it when they got 1 million pairs of these socks sold and 1 million pairs given away. So it's like you can have these opportunities, and there's multiple ways of playing where you have lots and lots of ways of making that impact. And also what you said, I think, is so important. It's like you want to share the stories. And not for like beating your chest, like saying how great I am, but for like also it empowers other people. It's like you also become a lighthouse for other businesses. It gives examples. It gets people more connected, which then sometimes will show up in all sorts of ways. Better team members. It shows up as unique partnership opportunities. It shows up as sometimes media opportunities. I really think, one of my predictions is that this has just sort of become the way of what business is going to be. But there is this period of time right now where you can have an opportunity to get some differentiation from it as well, if you want to put on your marketing business hat on again too. But again, it's got to come from your heart first.
Yeah. And, one of the things I just wrote down because you said it and I don't want to forget it, you talked about empowered employment and seeing things as an advantage and a benefit within your organization rather than what some people may say as a disadvantage, right? And, one of the things that I think is important to me personally is supporting new immigrants into the country. So I happen to be based in Canada. That's where my company is, but it could also be into the United States. My parents were immigrants, similar to yours. Like they didn't come from Russia, they came from England, but they came after the war with nothing. And they didn't even come together. My dad came first and he worked his ass off and then he got my mom over. And the only reason they came to Canada is because Canada offered free travel to Canada. And the other option was Australia. And Australia, they would give you a loan to cover the travel. And so my dad was like, we'll take free over a loan kind of thing, right? And they created a life here. And then all of my kids were born in England. And so there was a point in 2006 where we came, me and my kids and my husband, to Canada. My husband was a new Canadian. He didn't have a language barrier, but he was still a new Canadian. And there's challenges involved in that. So when we're in our recruitment process at Alchemy, we look at that aspect. Now, a person we just added to the team, her name's Anna. She's from Colombia and English is her second language. And a lot of people are like, oh, there's this language barrier. Oh, like this is going to be hard for clients or whatever. I'm like, we have Spanish speaking clients. Like this is an advantage, right? Like we've got Canadian and American clients that live in Mexico. And so now we don't have to translate a receipt because Anna can read it. I see the advantage of Anna's gift of dual language, right? Not the disadvantage of maybe somebody not being able to totally understand her English while she improves it, right?
Yeah, and I'll give you, two other things that sparked for me as you're talking about that. One, I imagine that there's some other immigrants that are, some other languages too, that, Spanish is obviously a, tremendously big language. And if there was, I don't know, what's some other groups that are kind of bigger right now in Canada?
Well, like any immigrant from the continent of India. Like we have a large Indian community. And again, we just hired a gentleman named Deepak who speaks like 4 languages or something.
Right. So to me, that's like, it's going to open up doors for business clients. That's their native tongue. And that they also want to have that trust and that relationship. And so I think it could be a unique business advantage. The other thing that kind of sparked for me is, a lot of people are having a hard time finding great people. And so you want to think of this maybe as like pipeline too. So it's like, all right, well, maybe your team funds a scholarship every year or 3 scholarships or whatever it is for bookkeeping services. And then, eventually they sort of graduate up. It's a longer term play, but it's going to, it'll be a really interesting way of getting the right people. And I see this a lot with like trade related things like, there used to be more of an apprentice model, and there's not so much an apprentice model anymore, but there is opportunities to do something like that where you're kind of like building your own bench of great people.
I love that. So love that idea. So now I'm all over the empowered employment. I'm going to go tell my team to go figure that out so that we're talking about it in that framework, right? Because I just didn't have a kind of like a tag to put on it so that we can refer to this is what we're doing.
There's also an opportunity. Like my brain works in these ways like puzzle pieces, right? So it's like, could we take, anything that could be looked at as a disadvantage, people with disabilities, because they could work from home in some way. And it's like, all right, what are the unique advantages? And so many people are like underemployed if they have a quote unquote a disability, but I think there's ways of providing just unique ways that could really empower them.
Yeah. Awesome. So if people are feeling inspired by our talk today, our little chit chat, what do you think that they can do?
So I think you don't have to go all in, right? Like you don't have to reinvent your business completely. You don't have to be like, all right, this is what we're going to do. I also believe in like starting small and playing around. So it could be, we might run a promotion for this month only or whatever, and like play around with it and be like, all right, well, when we sell XYZ thing, then XYZ happens. And then you can see like, did this, what was the impact that happened? What, did we sell more? Did we have more engagement in some way or what happened? And the more you integrate it, the better your results are going to be, right? Like if it's just simply like, all right, well, we're going to sell this, I don't know, coffee mug and $1 goes to XYZ thing. that's, maybe okay. But if you can like think about more how to integrate it, where it's like, all right, we sell this coffee mug and this is going to happen for, I don't know, for the people that we support that harvest the coffee beans or whatever. Like, I'm just completely making that up, but that's one way of like thinking about it. So you can start playing small and be like, all right, more of like a limited, I like experiments, right? They can play around with it, see what happens. And the other thing is you can start thinking about, okay, well, maybe we're not cash rich right now, and that would hurt to contribute in that way. But what's the other things that we have? What's, in those other buckets that we talked about, like where's the other leverage? So that's one way of thinking about it. And just think like one little thing, like what's the one little thing that you could do that could make a difference? And then we start measuring that and start seeing what happens. And also seeing like, does that get exciting to talk about for you, for your clients, for your team? What's, and you can start seeing that, yeah, this is what I want to do more of. And then you start getting deeper into, okay, how do we really maybe reinvent our company, or what does it look like to do that?
That's so good. So thank you so much for sharing this. You shared so much gold here. Like it's just always so awesome to spend time with you. Can't wait to when we're on our next adventure together. It's hopefully very soon. Yeah, I'm just so grateful. I really want to encourage people to check out Yanik's book, Evolved Enterprise. And if anything here sparked an awareness, go with that. Go with that intuitive nudge. Like, just see where it takes you. Be willing to just explore it. Like you said, like an experiment, right?
Yeah. And I like sitting with questions too. So, if a question's like, well, what's the one thing that we can add that could be more impactful in our business? And you just let that kind of sit and simmer a little bit. And I guarantee you in the shower or somewhere else, you're going to have more than one idea, and then go with it, see what happens.
And because everybody knows, well, if they know me, they know I love cards. You do have an amazing deck of cards, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, like just so amazing. And the cosmic sloth is forever ingrained in my brain as relating directly to you, Yanik. So I love that. And I'm just so grateful for you.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. My dog decided to go completely nuts here at the end. So.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. And thanks for spending the time with us. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. What did you love? What was your biggest aha moment? My biggest takeaway from my conversation with Yanik, and the thing I brought straight back to my leadership team at Alchemy, is the reminder of empowered employment. This has been a game changer already in my business, and as we step up our game over at Alchemy, the effects grow exponentially. Don't forget to hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Share your biggest takeaway, your biggest aha, or give me some feedback or say hi. I can't wait to hear from you. And don't forget, get your Rich Life Revolution workbook. We've had great feedback about it, and it's really helping our listeners create their own Rich Life Revolution. Watch out for episode 13 next week, where I am dropping all the top tips for money and wealth creation. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got at least one gold nugget today. Be sure to grab your copy of the Rich Life Revolution workbook to help you set the foundation for your next level of wealthy. Get it now at richliferevolution.ca, and I'll see you later.